Hello and welcome to Consciously Awesome Live here on Solivity TV. I'm your host, Sheila Applegate, a spiritual seer, healer, teacher, author, and manifestation coach. Consciously Awesome is all about helping you to discover your brilliance, create the world that you desire as you bring that into form and in your relationships, career, and family, passions, all of it. So we have a very special guest here with us today. She is truly a soul sister to me. I met Tamara J. Madison through Aduna Events. Aduna is an online global and multicultural literary and visual arts journal based in Auburn, New York, and I have the privilege of being on the board. And they create these amazing events, which is where Tamara has done some poetry reading, and my soul just recognized her the first time I heard her and have basked in her brilliance ever since. So let me tell you a little bit about Tamara. It's Tamara J. Madison, and she's an author, poet, performer, editor, and instructor. Her critical and creative works have been published in various journals, magazines, and anthologies, including Linden Avenue, Poetry International, Extract, Web de Soul Review of Books, Tidal Basin Review, Black Magnolias, and Aduna. And her most recent poetry collection, which is out of this world amazing, is Threed, This Road Not Damascus. And it's been published by Trio House Press, and it was shortlisted under the title Breast Poems in 2015 Willow Books Literature Awards. Tamara has performed, recorded her works for stage, television, studio, and she enjoys facilitating creative writing and expression workshops for both youth and adults. I have the privilege of having attended one of those as well, and it's an incredible look into our own souls to bring out that creativity. And Tamara currently lives in Orlando, where she teaches as a professor of English and creative writing at Valencia College. She is, however, currently in Detroit, coming to us live from Detroit. How are you, Tamara? I'm so happy to have you here.
I am happy to be here. Thank you much. And thank you for your patience with me traveling and moving around. I'm actually recording right now downstairs in the lobby because the room is not ready. So thank you for your patience and forgiveness and all of that kind of thing. But it was really important to do this. So thank you for asking. And I just know that it's the right time. It's the right time amidst everything else going on. So thank you.
It is. And I'm so pleased that and honored that you persevered to be here with us today, no matter what was going on around you, and to be able to keep yourself centered and to be in joy and dance with us today, to
Thank
enjoy
you.
the pleasures of life, because you bring so much joy everywhere you go.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, that's an ongoing practice, though. It's an ongoing
Mm.
practice. And as soon as you said, keep your center, I thought to myself, I got a little to the left of my center today. I got a little to the right. But I think the difference is I don't go as far away from my center as I used to. And I'm
Mhm.
able to pull myself back a little more quickly than I used to. It used to be sometimes things could knock me off for weeks at a time and I'd be in a rut
Right.
or what have you. But it's an ongoing practice and I'm getting better at, just dancing more gracefully.
Oh, I think that's beautiful. And, I often talk about it with my clients and people that work with Consciously Awesome about being in the vortex. And we kind of say that. And it gets to a point where it's almost like bumper bowling, like you just have to hit the
Mhm.
side a little bit and then you bounce back in, because you recognize it doesn't feel good to go way out,
Mhm.
way out
Mhm.
center. So
Mhm.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
You know what, though? I just thought of something funny, and maybe not so funny. But when you said something about being bumped from side to side, the first
Mhm.
thing I thought was, well, that's what creates the rhythm. When you get
Mm.
bumped from one place to another, that creates rhythm. And where there is rhythm, there is the opportunity to dance. So if we look at the bumping as being a part of the process and turn that into the
Yeah.
joy of dancing with that process, then it's a different perspective of how you look at the bumps and the, things like that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And that is what I kept thinking when I woke up this morning. I get to dance with Tamara today.
Tamara loves to dance, honey. I
I
really,
didn't know
really
it was
do.
going to be a tango. No.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I'm also thinking as you say that, when you're creative as you are, and drawing on all those emotions for your writing and in touching others, it is the dance, right? It is about being in life and being able to draw on that, but also to experience the chaos, because creation comes in that chaos as well.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think it's just about being an artist and being a quote unquote creative. I think it's any time you are creative about living, period, because we
Mhm.
always have those choices where we can look at something as being disastrous and something that is going against us because of our fears, or we can look at it as part of the process and turn
Right.
that into a creative process and trust the process, and we see where it goes and we build and we create something regardless as to what is happening, right? And I think
Right.
some of the, for example, like some of the, when I sit down to write a piece, I'm not
Mhm.
always sure where it'll go, and I have to
Right.
trust that it's going to go someplace where I will land, hopefully gently. But even if
Mhm.
not, I'll still survive it, and it'll still be something beautiful that is created. But that process is true when it comes to many things in our lives. At some point or another, we have to trust the process that will survive and that there's an opportunity to grow. I remember thinking years ago that one of the biggest problems people have is trusting other people instead of trusting themselves to survive
Mm.
whatever somebody else does. It's a totally different perspective,
Yeah.
right? If I don't trust other people, then I'm always closed, I'm shut down, and there are a lot of gifts that I miss out on and blessings from someone else that I miss out on, right? But
Mhm.
if I trust that no matter what happens, if I open my heart and I approach it wisely and whatever, no matter
Mhm.
what happens, whether that person handles the gift of me gently or not, I'm going to survive and I'll live to have another opportunity. Does that make sense? So that's like trusting the creative process of a poem or a dance or a painting or whatever that you start, and you're not sure where it's going to go.
Yeah, when you said that, I thought about um, earlier on, even in my career, I used to say, I I don't trust other humans, but I trust my own spiritual connection so I can open myself up to other humans. But as I've grown, I think that yes, I know I can survive. I can grow with every situation. My divine connection is always there, and I can trust other humans, and I can open up to the experience because I'm not dependent on them to behave in a certain way. So it's given me an opportunity to dance with other beings and enjoy that journey even more. So not just between myself and spirit in a world of people, but with them and around them. And I do see how we bring that into our creative projects because we just most of the time I don't know where the path in front of me is. I know the next step and I know perhaps the final outcome that's being projected right now, but how that path is going to lead there is where the joy comes in.
Mhm.
You
And it
know,
can
that's
also feel scary too, right?
Mhm.
It can feel really, really scary. But I think the more you hang on to that joy and keep the joy of it as your focus, then the scary part does not eclipse the joy,
Yeah.
and it does not eclipse your moving forward, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess, yeah, that excitement, we have to, that at some point that fear becomes an excitement because we've had enough evidence that it's going to get through there. It's not always
Mhm.
fun, but that's sort of that excitement of the roller coaster we get on to, even though we're going to be scared, right?
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm. Mhm.
and we can enjoy that journey, even when it's uncomfortable sometimes. Yeah.
It's so funny because in, I believe it was January of 2020, I actually had, um, I knew a writer who was just really, really struggling with a project that she was working on. And she was, to the point of wanting to scrap her manuscript and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it just inspired me to write a blog, write a piece that I called Play-Doh 2020, right? Play-Doh 2020.
Mhm.
And what came up in the article was this idea that, when we were little children, unlike being a great adult writer or whatever we think we are, right? When we were children and we played with Play-Doh, we didn't have to know how to do it. We
Right.
just played with it, right? And we
Mhm.
went by curiosity and we went by joy, right? The
Uh-huh.
squishiness in your hands, that bizarre smell of Play-Doh, the wild colors, the fact that you could roll it and you could make a ball with it and you could poke holes in it and you could put colors together. It was the curiosity and the joy that led us to creating something. And we had no idea if it was going to be a giraffe or an ashtray or a rock. Okay. I remember creating a rock once, right? And what I was saying in that blog, as inspired by her, I said, where's your curiosity? I
Mm.
said, get your curiosity back, get your joy back. I said, that's where you go. And I sent her the blog and, everything. Her book is now published, which I'm excited to say, right?
Mm.
But I realized months later that I wrote that, I believe, in January of 2020. And
Mm.
holding on to curiosity, trusting
Right.
curiosity and holding on to joy actually became the way to get through 2020 altogether. I had
Oh,
no clue at the time, right?
yeah.
And the article was called Play-Doh 2020.
Oh, I love it. I
And
love
here we
it.
go. And then the next thing you know, weeks later, or was it 2 months later,
Right.
everything started to change and we had no control over it. All we could do was hold on to our joy and remain curious and trust the
Yeah.
process.
Oh, that's beautiful. And
Mhm.
did you do that? Were you able to do that? And how did it affect your writing in 2020?
Oh, how did it affect my writing? Hmm. I wrote things that I've never written before. I came up
Mm.
with new things that I had never come up with before. I came up with a new concept for my next book. I thought it was going to be one thing, and it turns out it's going to be another. Um, I started going for walks more in the park and being out in nature more. And I'm
Mhm.
not a nature writer, I'm not a nature project person,
Mhm.
but it still inspires my creativity and it helps me to stay balanced. And one of the things that I started doing was walking first thing in the morning before I did anything else because I felt like that was the thing that I did for me before the
Mhm.
day became too chaotic and the day was turned over to somebody else and what someone else needed. And so that's how it changed for me. And that still inspires what I'm doing and I'm continuing to do it.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Mhm.
That's nice. So let's talk about the poetry and that healing journey of poetry. Let's it's just so potent right now, but it's potent all the time. So I want to be able to just step back and what what value, what draws you to poetry? Why do you believe of all the writing and things that you do, what draws you to the poetry and holds you in that space?
Oh, that's real simple. Poetry makes everything better.
There you go.
Period. Period. It really does, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not getting paid for this announcement. It's honestly what I have witnessed. If you think about it, your favorite lyrics in a song are
Mhm.
probably a metaphor, and there's something about them that sounds like poetry, right? Your
Right. Oh,
favorite
always. Yeah.
lyrics, right? The rhythm that you listen to in the words of a song, those are
Mhm.
poetic tools, right? Some of
Mhm.
the commercials that catch your attention with those classy, uh, eye catching, ear catching slogans, those are
Mhm.
poetic devices that are being
Mhm.
used in commercials. Um, that line in a love letter that you remember out of the whole letter is probably a line of poetry. Even in film, some of the most beautiful things that you see in film, the visual images or the narration over a film, or when a character is speaking and you go, it's probably poetry. And so when
Mhm.
you put poetry into anything, it's almost as if it reaches to a deeper dimension, right? One of my definitions of poetry is that poetry is the language of the soul, the how you, not just what you say. I don't believe that the soul can be, how do I want to say, 100% translated, but the closest thing that comes to translating it is poetry,
Mhm.
right? So you know
Yeah.
how when you're translating from English to Spanish or from Arabic to English or whatever, a little something gets lost in the translation because the
Right.
rhythms and the sounds are different. The idioms or the colloquial expressions might be different. So you lose a little something, but you get the essence of it, right?
Mhm.
So poetry translates as closely as possible, like the essence of the
Right.
soul of the matter. And so I think that's why poetry, of all things. And then if you're
Mhm.
somebody who, just doesn't have the time to sit down and do a novel or read a short story collection, or you haven't read anything since middle school and you want to start reading something, then start with poetry because you can find a whole universe in maybe one
Right.
verse, right?
Yeah.
Of
Mhm.
course.
I love that because I think it is the rhythm and it is the soul. Sometimes we don't even hear the words, but we feel the flow of the message in the poetry.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I,
And
I
it
think,
also uses so much of the colorful language of people, right?
mhm,
Those things that your grandmother used to say, like, oh my God. Like, I remember hearing expressions like, it's quiet enough to hear a rat piss on cotton, little things like that. A guy said to me one time, he was like, he said, T Mara, he said, girl, you look so good. If I threw you up in the air, you'd hang like a ball of sunshine. I mean, literally, just in
yeah,
passing, right?
yeah,
And so there are these beautiful expressions that we have that are trying to translate the essence of the soul of something. And
right.
so, it's all around us. It's everywhere. It is literally everywhere, but we don't recognize it necessarily as poetry. When Kendrick Lamar says to pimp a butterfly, really? Like, you know what I'm saying? But something inside of us knows how tragically exploitive that is.
Yeah,
But if I say the words tragically exploitive,
right.
it
You don't,
doesn't do the same thing for you
yeah,
as to pimp a butterfly,
right.
right? So
Yeah,
that's what poetry does. And I think the sad part is that so many people think that, poetry is for academia or poetry is for the spoken word stage. And I think in this country in particular, we forget sometimes that poetry is for anybody who is reaching into the soul, anybody. And I think the difference is that in some other cultures, they're still deeply connected to their poetry. So
Yeah.
you may have working class people who sweep the streets and cook in the kitchen who know their poets, just like people who have gone to the university. But in this culture, we've lost a little bit of a sight of that.
Yeah. As you're speaking, I'm thinking my daughter just gifted her cousin for her 16th birthday poetry. She went through
Mhm.
and picked out poems and books and all kinds of things to create this sort of poetry bundle for her for her birthday present. And I think that is that reminder that our souls need it. It's not academia. It's something
Mhm.
we need to grow as beings on earth. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's wonderful. Would you like to share one of your poems in with us right now?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. You reminded me. Would you like to speak a little bit about what you shared with me earlier today about the passing of a loved
Yes.
one?
Yeah. Okay. So as I told all of you, Tamara and I met through Aduna, and one of the other board members on Aduna, David Bergen, who is a beautiful soul who I've actually known since I was a child, radiant being who has touched so many lives. There was even a post on Facebook for the Syracuse area, which is where I am, with just tons of people writing their experience with him when they went into his shop to buy a suit, and he passed into the spirit world this week. So we thought coming here today, Tamara and I connected through Aduna, and knowing that we're talking about the healing aspects of poetry that we would, well, that Tamara would pick a poem in honor of David and for his family's healing. So this is the poem that Tamara will choose, right?
Yes, 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 yes. And I want to share too that just a little bit of the story behind the poem. This poem was written for a very, very dear friend of mine who was a personal friend, but also a creative inspiration because he
Mm,
was a writer and he was an actor and a director as well. And the blessing is that I had the opportunity to write it while he was still living. And I shared it with him while he was still living. And then when he passed away, it was absolutely devastating for me. And believe it or not, Sheila, that was right around the time that I came in touch with Aduna. So it was
mm,
like, in some ways, I lost a part of him, but then Aduna came into my life at the same time. And the grieving process was just, oh my God, it was really rough. It was
mm,
really, really rough because he was that person that could say things to me in my language in a way that I understood. And I remember saying to him one day, I was like, you know what? I said, if I really wanted to hear the voice of God, you know what? It wouldn't be Morgan Freeman. It would be your voice, right? And he was totally blown away because he was a very humble soul. And he was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. I was like, nothing. You don't have to do anything, right? And then the next thing I know, I don't get to hear that voice anymore, right? And I
right,
remember asking, I was like, God, why would you take this person away from me? It just didn't make sense. And I was like, really, really, really? This is what we're doing now. Really, that's what you're going to do? Take this away from me?
right.
And I remember hearing in my heart, I wouldn't take anything away from you that you really
Mm,
needed. And so when I return to this poem, you'll see the last line of the poem reminds me that my relationship with that person and that person's effect on my life is unending. Okay.
beautiful.
And so it's called Melisma for Linwood. In the midnight ballroom of blessing, with resonant harp strings, you have stroked my soul to symphony. Beneath starry chandeliers, my heart rings hallelujah arias drunken from the mint julep breath we share. Arms poised, yet empty, I pirouette, sweat this soulful minuet. Gently I waltz with our delicacy and flirt infinite possibilities.
Mm.
Mm.
Oh, I love that. Beautiful.
And I thought of that piece when you sent me that message. I thought of that piece because I thought about how important it is to remember that our relationships are ongoing.
Yeah.
Right? When someone crosses your path and crosses your life, there's like an infinite ripple effect, I believe, even after you no longer remember what happened or where you met or what have you. There's a chemistry that happens when you cross another's path, and there's an exchange. And then when it's someone who deeply moves you, right?
Mhm.
I think that that chemistry is even more dynamic. And so after their physical passing, I believe that that chemistry still remains and still has an effect. So that was why I wanted to share that.
I love that. And I think it's so perfect because the soul goes on, and
Mhm.
that remembrance, yes, the ripple effect that goes out from the past, but also the continuation, that knowing that you can tap into that energy with your
Mhm.
friend, with your partner, your family member who's crossed over. And I think for me, I always like to emphasize that when we remember that exactly what you just said, that it continues on regardless of our contact in the physical world, it is easier for us to open to love because we don't have to protect ourselves for the moment that we're going to lose love, because love never ends. It
Mhm.
continues on in that ripple.
hmm And I
That's
think we can be so contradictory sometimes because, on one hand, we have all of these interesting conversations about how this is just a spacesuit. I'm actually a spirit having a physical experience in this body, right? So we say that when we're talking in that context, but then when the soul leaves the body, we forget that. We
Mhm.
forget that. Or when we see someone in a spacesuit looking in a way that makes us uncomfortable or doing something that makes us uncomfortable, we get really preoccupied with the
Yeah,
spacesuit
spacesuit.
and we
Yeah,
forget about connecting to the soul that is present there, right? So it's
yeah,
interesting how we can be contradictory sometimes without even knowing it.
right. Because I think we struggle with that as humans because we are both, right? We are both the spacesuit and the soul, and there's beauty in both. And that's why we grieve when the space so is no longer hanging the way it used to hang, um, even if we know that the soul is there for us and connected. But also, like you've mentioned, I like that reflection that you said, that it's important for us to remember that when we're using this spacesuit to divide us, to separate us or identify away from someone.
Mhm.
Um, that's really beautiful. I want to dive deeper into this. We're going to take a short break and then let's continue on with this conversation about the soul of poetry. Thank you.
Solivity Magazine and Beyond Words Publishing is pleased to announce its latest charitable partner, the National Women's History Museum. Please join us in supporting this amazing organization.
Don't tell me I can't sit where I want.
Don't tell me I can't be an inventor. Don't tell me I can't be a soldier. Don't tell me I can't be a movie star. I am Anna Mae Wong.
I am Rosa Parks. I refuse to give up my bus seat to a white person.
I am Tabitha Babbitt. I invented the circular saw.
Don't tell me I can't fly.
Don't tell me I can't be an explorer. I am Sacagawea.
Don't tell me I can't be a scientist. I'm Gertie Teresa Corey. I won a Nobel Prize in Physiology.
I am Deborah Sampson.
Don't tell me I can't open my own business. I'm Estee Lauder. I started a global empire that now has $7 billion in annual sales.
I disguise myself as a man to fight in the Revolutionary War.
Don't tell me I can't be a spy.
Don't tell me I can't be a journalist.
I am Mary Elizabeth Bowser.
I'm Amelia Earhart.
I starred in over 40 films from the silent era to the talkies.
I am Hovita Idar. I was an editor, a publisher, and I even founded my own newspaper.
During the Civil War, I was a maid for the Confederate president. He thought I was illiterate, but I actually had a photographic memory.
I was shot twice in my first battle and removed the bullets myself.
These are just some of the women who have changed history. Don't let them be forgotten.
Become a member and support the
National Women's History
Museum. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook.
Please join us in supporting the National History Women's Museum. You can find out more information by going to solivity.com/support women's history.
Hello and welcome back to Consciously Awesome here on Solivity TV. We are talking to Tamara J. Madison about the healing art of poetry. Tamara, we've already touched on so many beautiful things, but we were leaving for the break. We were just talking about grief and souls, and let's touch on, you mentioned before we started about being in this hotel unexpectedly and having to roll with the punches as we do this interview, and just that this is the natural state that we've been in for a while. I loved what you said. Can you kind of go back to that a minute and let's explore that?
Sure. I can't remember the article I read or the term that was used, but several months ago, I read an article, and the best way I can summarize it is to say that the article was talking about how people were just getting totally burnt out because what we thought was going to be a temporary situation has just turned into a situation that appears to have no end. So how do we survive that? And it was more of a psychological approach, because it was saying that, the brain is wired to do certain things. I'm not a psychologist, or a psychiatrist either, but it was saying that the brain is wired to handle certain kinds of tragedies and different things like that, to help you survive and get over to the other side. But we haven't seen what the other side of this looks like, and we haven't even gotten close. So how do we keep going at this pace? And so, I had been thinking about that for quite some time, and how that was showing up in different ways in young people trying to go to school so differently, in older people, in people on their jobs. The fact that we haven't been able to congregate in a whole lot of things. And then on top of that, you have things exploding in social media and just one distraction after another, along with grief, right? So even if it wasn't somebody in your own family, you knew somebody who knew somebody that was passing, or you saw what was going on the television, and the numbers and the counts and the what do they call them? How, there are certain places that keep account of COVID cases, of deaths, and all of that type of thing. And so I've had some conversations with friends, and we've been talking about how the grieving, whether we're conscious of it or not, is continual. It just keeps, like the energy bunny, right? It just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going. So what do we do about that? And along with that come all kinds of distractions, some positive, some negative, in terms of how to deal with that grieving. And so we've been talking about how one way to survive that is to find a way to hang on to your joy. No matter how small, any little bitty thing that there is to celebrate or to be joyful about, it is so important to hold that, because that's what gets you through that continual grieving process, and it helps to balance it out a bit, right? And I think what it does is it opens us up to little joys that we've ignored for a long time. I have a favorite scene in the movie The Color Purple, where Celie and Suge are walking through a field of purple flowers.
Mm.
And Suge says, "You know what? I think it makes God mad when we walk by the color purple and act like we don't notice." You ever notice all the things trees do to get our attention? Well, now that we are in this new world, many people are starting to notice
Right.
the color purple, or notice trees, or notice gentle gestures and things like that. And those things become those little doses of joy that we can take as good preventive medicine that help us to balance the grief and the distraction and all of those other things, because they're not going to stop. So we have
Mm.
to find ways to keep our joy going.
Mm. It's so beautiful, and I think it's almost a gift to us that we're in this situation because we lost that, right? That should be the primary aspect of life. Like, we come to Earth, what do we come here for? We don't come here to survive and stack up money or whatever that is, or to get through the grief and until we can get to heaven. We come here for the beauty of this physicality, the touch of a friend, or the baby's soft cheek, or the bunny that runs in front of you. That's the miracle of Earth. And maybe as a humanity, we're starting to remember that again,
Mhm, mhm. And I
almost out of
think
survival.
hmm hmm And I think that brings me back to literature and poetry. You know, when we share our stories, that's how we share our humanity. Whether it's your grandpa sitting at the kitchen table after dinner with a cup of coffee, holding the whole room spellbound, or whether it's girlfriends, chatting on social media, oh, he kissed me, or whatever that might have been about, or, the stories that we find, that's what creates literature, any form of literature. And poetry is very, very often a brief and shorter form of stories with all kinds of depth to it in very, very few words. But the sharing of our stories and taking time to connect in that way, whatever way it is, that is how we share our humanity. Whether we agree or disagree, at least it has been shared and it's an offering. Mhm.
Mm. And when you share your poetry, especially when it's my absolutely favorite when I can hear it in your voice. um, I feel like I know you more. I feel like I've had windows into not just your life, but sometimes your ancestors' life, and thread, right? And things that I didn't even, essences that I didn't even know existed, now
Mhm.
touching my heart and my soul. I'm ready for you to share another poem. Share your
Okay, I
soul
will.
with
And I have a piece particularly for you. But before I do that, I have to share one of my other mantras, right?
us. Okay.
And this one came from a mentor of mine, a poet by the name of Carol Frost. I was sitting in on a workshop of hers. And one of the notes that I took down that she said that I have always remembered and that I continue to use, she said, poetry at its best is language lifted into ceremony,
Mm,
right?
yes.
And
Yes.
when we think of sacred ceremony, right? That's that moment when the drums are playing and the candles are lit and people are singing and dancing and magic happens. Like a bird flies into the middle of something, or the ocean rises, or somebody says or sings something that they've never sung before. There's and ceremony is a sacred space where anything can enter into it, to be lifted, to be raised.
Mhm.
For them. So, with that being said, I was thinking about what you were saying about at one time not trusting other people.
Mhm.
So, I'm going to read a love poem. Mm, a love
Mhm.
poem. And that's all I'm going to say. You know. And it is from Three. It's
Mhm.
called Poet's Consummation. For Kaba, crashed the stone tablets of commandments, their dust blown to higher winds. I searched the darkest caves, made tombs my home, deciphered the writings on the walls to find you. Only in my stillness did you arrive. At last, I offer my scarred wounds, my loosed tongues, my asymmetry, my threed vision. Beloved, within me, there is no place you may not enter.
Mm. Wow, that's beautiful. Oh.
And
I
that's
love
a learning to trust the process thing too.
yes. Yeah, completely, right? To open to that space and the depth of it.
Mhm.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for sharing. Thank you for, oh my goodness, your gifts that you share so brilliantly with all of us. Tell the listeners about Threed a little bit if you can.
Oh, Threed is an ongoing journey that is still.
Yes. In 19
Has been a
Mm.
journey to learn this voice, to embrace these teachings, um, to accept that growth, to surrender to that growth. Because for a while, I was in my writings, I'd be writing and I'd hear a voice that sounded a little familiar, but was a little bit of me, but it was also a lot of something else. And it would say things, or I'd look and find things on the page that kind of surprised me. And sometimes I'd finish writing and I'd go, okay, you know what? Not right now. And I'd walk away, and I might be gone for weeks, I might be gone for months, and then it would always pull me back. Um, and I know it sounds really corny, but it's really true. It was kind of like puberty, right? When
Mhm.
hair started to grow in strange places and things started to develop, and you didn't quite know what to do with them, but you couldn't stop it, right? And you
Right.
had to find a way to be awkward through it and make your way through it and gracefully learn, how to care for it, what to do with all of that type of thing. So it was that kind of growth for me over a period of years. And I have to say, that book is still like that for me, where there are times when I need something. I don't always know what it is, and sometimes I'll pick up that book and I'll open to a page and I'll just sit there and read, and I'll sit a minute and something comes to me. It's like I'm able to rebalance, I'm able to let go, I'm able to move forward in a fresh way. And I'm still learning from that book and some of the things that were written and that voice. And the three that comes from the three-breasted woman. The three-breasted woman in the book, I consider her to be a spiritual guide of sorts. In the poetry world, she would be called a persona. So they call the book, they say the book is a bit speculative because it has a little bit of the magical because of this three-breasted woman. Well, for me, the breast represents a chalice that holds humanity, right? Because the breast is that which nurtures humanity, both physically and otherwise. And so if you have one that has three, then that's all the more humanity, all the more compassion, and what have you. And so as I began to work more on the book and go through the journey with editors and ask myself about who is this woman, this creature, one of the things that came to me is that she has three, we have two, but there's some kind of connection. What if that means that we've lost some of our compassion, right? But that's still where we come from. So those were some of the things that I was musing over when, I was writing poems where the poet was speaking to three-breasted woman or a three-breasted woman was speaking to the poet. But it was that idea of reconnecting to not just humanity, but a greater and a deeper humanity than we normally deal with here.
Mhm. And you captured it. You captured that in these poems. And when you speak to me, and my background is in channeling and the goddess, and drawing that energy, and I hear the same thing. It's the same. It's sort of that same energy coming through you in your form. I say that when I wrote Enchanted One, that it's the messages that came through, and then my experience of trying to integrate them. And just like you, I will go back to that book and pick it up because it's not just me. It is a part of us. I hear you in Threed for sure. And also maybe another part of you, and that part that divine feminine energy that flows through us in every moment. And yet, I think as humans, maybe, or as humanity, we have forgotten that third breast, that piece of compassion. And
Mhm,
hopefully we are rediscovering that as you
mhm,
so clearly draw in and teach us. You teach us
mhm.
to rediscover that with your words.
It was interesting because in the process of working on the book as a collection, at first it started coming years ago as individual poems out of nowhere. And then when I looked at combining them, the book went through like maybe 3 or 4 drafts, right? And a metamorphosis. And when I started putting things together and the picture of three-breasted woman for me as the visual artist became clearer, it was also very clear to me that I was never supposed to describe her face,
Mm,
ever. And what was very clear to me was that every woman will see what she needs to see. So I didn't need to give her those kinds of characteristics. There was something much greater about her that needed to be translated into this book. And
right.
so, mhm,
Because she is a reflection of each woman. Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? So we need to read her poem.
Okay,
Which
let's
is that
read her
one?
poem.
Um, what's one of my favorites from her? Oh, Catechism. Catechism. And I have to say that the title suggests read this road, not Damascus, right? It's suggesting that Paul's road to Damascus, or this particular road that he took to enlightenment is not the only one. So that's what the title is suggesting, right? And so there's a lot of dialogue in the book that refers to biblical imagery and symbols and things like that, conversations with King James and what have you. So this is one of her poems, one of the short ones that I really love. And this was when I had a much clearer picture of her and her voice. And it's called Catechism. Three-breasted woman teaches. Foolish children ask me, can you feed multitudes with loaves and fish, convert water to wine, tiptoe the sea. I stiffly hold my tongues, thinking, the nations I shat, bushels I fried. Besides, who needs fish, wine, or floating feet when threed across dimensions fly? That's Three-Breasted Woman.
I love it. I
Yeah, so
love it.
she's still teaching me. She is still teaching me. There are those days when I'm about to, wig out and let something mess with me, like you saw earlier about an hour and a half ago. And she's standing right there like, you do realize you really don't have to be bothered about this, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, that's right, right? Because who needs fish or floating feet, right?
Right. You got three breasts.
Mhm.
I love
Find the
it.
compassion. Where is there the opportunity, Tamara, to be compassionate in this moment? In this moment where you could nut up, right? And be very ineffective or unproductive, where is the moment to find compassion? And that makes a difference.
Yeah. And I watched you when we came first on, and you felt that flusteredness of not having the space you were meant to be in, and the distractions out of compassion for the listeners, I'm sure. But then that shift in you, and when you made that choice to center in, to remember, to allow her message to flow through you, your whole energy field, your face, everything changed. And that's what matters. These distractions that we're experiencing in life right now, they're not important, but they will continue, like you said, unless we shift our attention,
Mhm,
because they're there.
mhm.
And when we shift our attention, they no longer influence us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right, because what we have created in this space right now, you and me, Ryan, everybody who's listening, we have created a sacred space and a vortex right here. You have no idea. It's getting cloudy outside. The man at the hotel desk is talking. People are coming in and out, going over to the business office. There's all of these things going on around, right? But there's a vortex here because we chose to use power in a different kind of way. We chose in this moment, all of us, to use power to connect, right? I could have chosen to use my power in another kind of way, right? In terms of how I
Would have
honestly
been a
felt
different
about it.
show.
Exactly, right? But it was like, no, you have the power to create a vortex and a safe space where something else can happen. And then once that happened, there were other powers added into this. And now we have this,
We
right?
do. And it's beautiful and it's perfect. It's
Mhm.
perfect. We are getting close to the end. I want to make sure everyone knows to go to Tamara J. Madison, right, to get read the book and learn more about you. And then I also want, if you could take a moment, well, you could take a moment to say whatever you want to say. But one thing I was thinking of is maybe someone today that didn't know they were into poetry, but got inspired today. What would you say to someone who's feeling that right now?
Oh, I would say that it's calling you. Evidently, it's calling you. If you got that feeling, it's calling you. If there was a little hair that stood up on the back of your neck, or chills on your arm, or you became flushed, it's calling you for some reason or another. Whether it's something that you need to be reading that's waiting for you to pull it off the shelf, or whether it's something that you need to be writing, and very often the two go hand in hand, right? Or whether it's something that you used to write that you need to pick back up again. Something is calling you. Or maybe it's just that your soul and your muse need to be nurtured. Poetry is written about everything. You can find poems from scientific perspectives, science fiction perspectives, about nature, about relationships. It's so very diverse. And you can go to Google, right? And put in a search, and you'll probably find something that moves you far beyond anything you could imagine if you look hard enough.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And just let it inspire you. And as you were talking, I just saw the Play-Doh again. Play with it. Let it be Play-Doh. Let poetry be Play-Doh as you take this adventure. Oh, wow. Well, Tamara, it is always such a joy to be with you and to spend time together. And I would love to have you on again next season if you're up for it, because there's so much more we can talk about.
Yes, thank you, thank you. I appreciate that.
Awesome. And all my love to you in this moment as you move through.
And you know what? I have to say thank you to you. That first poem I read was about the person that I lost also right around the time when I met you. And I don't know if you remember it, but you said some very encouraging things to me at that time that reminded me that that presence was still moving with me. And so I'm grateful to you for that.
I didn't make the connection when you said that earlier that it was right before you connected to Aduna, but he did not make the connection of that moment. But I'm
So
glad
this is
that I
full
could be
circle.
there. Right.
Yes.
It really
Yes.
is. It's perfect. It's perfect. And you had that poem with you today, even though you're traveling. You don't have probably access to your poems, but it was there ready for you to read. So perfect. Oh, such a joy. And we will be back for more in the next season, I'm sure.
Thank
I want
you.
to thank you, Tamara. Thank you, listeners, for being here today. Thank you, Brian, for always bringing the production quality right up to par and getting it out into the world. We are so grateful for Solidity. And I wish everyone an amazing week. Be back here next week. Next week, we will be talking about spirituality and social change with one of my favorite people in the world, who also happens to be my daughter, Sheila Applegate. So join me next week, and we will enjoy that little excursion into spirituality and social change. Have a wonderful week, everyone.